Stay tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. Joan served the state of California as a member on the Arts Council and on the Film Commission. She was formerly on the Architectural Commission and fulfilled 2 terms on the Fine Arts Commission for the city of Beverly Hills. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview magazine, Condé Nast Publications, and the Hearst Corporation, Joan covered the world of fashion, the mysteries of food, the excitement of theater, and the international art scene. She continues to find people who are on the cutting edge of their professions. Here's Joan Agajanian Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. We're here taping at the Hollywood Museum in the old historic Max Factor building. Our guests are writer, broadcaster Steve Julian and author Laurie Pepper, widow of the great Art Pepper. Broadcaster, and what a voice, playwright, Steve Julian grew up in Pomona, went to an all-boys Catholic school, studied theater and radio at Cal Poly Pomona. He's an actor who's been on stages since he was in his teens. Steve has written a series of one-acts and will tackle a trilogy of work dealing with social awareness. But first of all, before we get to any of that, what made you decide to be a policeman?
My dad was.
Oh, really?
Was.
In Pomona?
In Pomona.
Oh, fabulous.
And so I grew up in that environment. And after high school, I became a dispatcher there at Pomona.
Oh, you did?
And that's what launched the whole radio thing.
With your voice? Did people love your voice?
People said, you know, you ought to get a job in radio. And I said, is there money in it? They said, well, more than dispatching, probably. So.
More than dispatching. So you didn't go to the police academy?
Not until I was 28.
Wow. But you were acting when you were a kid.
I was acting as a teenager at the old
I was
Gallery
acting as a
Theater.
teenager.
Aren't they all?
No, where was it?
At the Gallery Theater in Ontario.
Oh.
It's not there anymore, but it was a wonderful place to get your teeth really into the whole notion of being on stage. I loved it.
And why did you go on stage? You came from a policeman background. Was your mother an actress?
She was a ballet dancer.
Oh, she was. Oh, so you had a little stage there.
There was something in the genes.
Something. With this dispatching and being on the police force and growing up in that, did that inform any of the plays that you wrote, these one-acts?
It informed a play that I wrote a couple of years ago that has never seen the light of day, and for good reasons. But it was a good practice round, I think, for What Kind of God that's up now.
Oh, What Kind of God? You started that? Oh, it was the prelude to that.
Last year we did a play called Altercations that I wrote in the Hollywood Fringe Festival. 6 performances. It was like a workshop version of the one that is opening at the Lillian Theater this month in Hollywood.
And that's part of that trilogy we're talking about?
It's the first play in that trilogy, exactly.
So how do you continue to write? Do you know what the second one and the third one will be?
I know what the second one is going to be. It's going to be about the unpunished rapes of men and women in the U.S. military. Oh,
that's very interesting. So they don't all have to relate to one another. They're not like built upon each other.
No, but they all have that common core of people being silenced.
People being silenced.
Right.
When you left the police force and were you writing there?
I was writing a little bit. I wrote a training video that we did over there, but I wasn't much into theater at the time. I had put that aside to make a living. Oh, you were doing that. But now you're a host on our LA National Public Radio, KPCC.
Local, KPCC.
Right.
Where were you before that?
Oh, I started there in 2000, and before that I was with a traffic reporting company. You know, you turn the radio on, you hear the traffic reports.
Yes, somebody else.
The 101 southbound is a mess from Melrose into downtown Los Angeles. Okay,
so you
I did that for 5 years.
You did?
Yes.
Did you do it on TV too?
I did it for the Orange County News Channel, OCN, which is gone.
Yeah, but they used to have it, didn't they? You could just click on and see the...
Mm-hmm.
And did you have to do anything special skill-wise to be an announcer? I don't know. You know, there's a movie called the voiceover movie. I forgot what it's called, but it's it's like you're always behind the scenes. No one ever sees your face, but you have your voice that's for the radio. Do you have your voice for the radio?
It's pretty much what you hear right now. I don't really have the radio. There's no affectation.
There's none.
I don't try to have one anyway.
But did you do any training?
It's mostly on the job. I went to Cal Poly and the University of Laverne, which is Laverne College at the time.
I know,
in the
that
late
was
70s.
so great, Laverne College.
Yeah.
It was.
I did the radio programs there. It was a nice training ground, but then it was really on-the-job training starting in 1980 that helped.
So you're on the morning show. When
Yes.
I'm on my way to ballet, I hear Steve Julian says it's 9 o'clock,
Yeah,
right?
time for take 2.
What time did you get there?
4 o'clock.
4 in the morning?
I get there at 4 o'clock in the morning.
And you work all, what are you preparing? What are you doing?
That first hour, I'm writing. I'm writing for myself. I'm rewriting stories that others have done to put it into my own voice so that it sounds different in the morning than it does if it aired the day before.
Oh, if it aired the day before.
And also
so when you get there, they give you your work, your script?
It's all in the computer. I just pull up the
you pull it
computer
up.
and start, going through each story one at a time.
You do it yourself? Do you actually do it yourself?
I do, yes.
mean, you actually have to decide what you're going to do?
I have 3 chimpanzees who I just...
No.
No.
But so then you rewrite what you're going to do?
do.
And then, so what time do you actually go on? You get there at 4?
5. Start on the air at 5.
You do? Well, I don't listen to you at 5. I hear
7
you at
people
9.
do. You're not one of them.
7. So, what other preparation do you have to do before you go into the studio?
I always try to keep tabs of what's going on in the news.
I see.
Online, read emails, know what the editors are thinking about, what the reporters are working on.
I see.
Just an awareness.
So what do they call what you do then?
I'm the local morning host.
That's it. Okay.
Right.
All right. When do you have time to write? Because you're writing for the theater. You've written all these one-acts.
My last newscast is at 10:04. I'm off the air at 10:06. I have no desk, no cubicle, and Hetty Lynn Hurties comes in and replaces me in the studio. So I would have nowhere to sit or stand. So I go home.
You have to leave.
I go home.
You have to leave.
I do.
And then do you start writing there?
At home. Oh,
Yeah.
And I love to write on the weekends early in the morning. If I get up about 5 or 6 in the morning, that's my best time to write.
You did this. Oh, you like to get up early, obviously. You go to work,
Well,
or
I'm used
you
to it
write on
now.
the weekends. What were the subjects of these one-acts?
Oh, let's see. There was one about a chef in a prison cooking his 300th death row final meal.
Is that right?
That was one of them. I did
And
one.
where'd you get that idea?
I have no idea.
Oh,
I don't know where it came from. I don't know. There was one I wrote about Bob Dylan being stopped at a sobriety checkpoint where he's completely sober, but nobody can understand him.
How long are these one-acts?
They're about 10 minutes. 10
Oh,
to
they're
15.
very short. And you wrote a lot of them. And where were they? Were they played on the air?
Actually, the Bob Dylan one was aired on KPCC, as was one other called 7 Legs, about a story, a spider missing a leg. But most we do over at the Edendale Library.
Oh, where is that?
That's on Alvarado and Sunset.
And they do readings?
Part of Drama West Theater Company. We do these every other month.
And who reads them?
We
Is
have
it
actors
cast?
come in. They're all cast with a director.
So there's several roles. It's not like just telling a story,
There will
like you're
be
telling
probably
us.
5 or 6 different one-acts each day.
Is that right?
Sometimes we have a short film at the end of it, too.
That's fantastic.
Oh,
What
they're
a
great
great
events.
program, right. And you work with the Ensemble Studio Theater. That's not the same thing, is it?
No, that's a different theater where Gates McFadden is the artistic director. She was Dr. Crusher on Star Trek. It's over in Atwater Village. And
Oh, that's nice.
they have a playwrights group, and it was in that group that I developed Altercations last year, and then What Kind of God this past year.
Okay, so let's talk about What Kind of God. It's a trilogy, we've said, and you
It's
know
the
the
first
first
in the
and the,
trilogy,
and the
right.
second we've talked. Tell us what the story is.
It's about, short and simple, it's the Catholic Church priest abuse scandal. And,
Okay, that we know you got from your all-boys Catholic school.
that was part of it. And actually, I learned about 2.5 years ago that my principal had a year-long relationship with a female student at his previous school in the 60s. And that's what inspired this play.
How'd you find it? Were you researching it, or what were you doing?
No, a friend of mine, Joel Castix, who works for the Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, knew that I was interested in this. And she sent me the story that she saw in the New York Times, a piece that Jennifer Medina wrote, early 2011. Yes. And it was about this priest. And I had that priest. And when I was in high school, as a senior, I was the editor of our school newspaper and got in trouble with him for something that I put in the paper. So I felt at that time that he had silenced me. And I had no idea that this girl, 10 years before I had come along, had been shut down, silenced as well.
Oh, she had been silenced too. But you were silenced for something you wrote. She was silenced for some abusive situation she was in, right?
Exactly.
Is that part of the story?
There are parallels to that.
So how did you cast it? How is it cast?
The one, there were 4 characters last year at Altercations, and the priest, who in last year's version kind of preyed upon this boy, came back to do the same role this year, but with a different characterization. The actor who had played the bishop last year was not available.
Oh, right.
And so
guess who played it?
Guess who's doing that this year?
I was going to ask you if you wrote yourself into your plays.
Not on purpose. Not on purpose. Although I'm really enjoying it.
All right, so you're acting as the bishop. Tell us what Altercations was then. Was that the one? Was that the short? Oh, was it?
No, it was a full-length play.
Oh, it was a full length.
It was an hour-and-a-half play, and it was part of the Hollywood Fringe Festival in 2012. It had the same subject material.
Oh, I see.
But I have since completely reworked the story, the script. It's about 95% new.
Who's directing it?
Aaron Lyons. A friend of mine over at Antias Theater Company in North Hollywood, Armin Shimmerman.
Great theater company.
It's wonderful, wonderful. I had asked him if he was available to direct, and he wasn't. But he said, well, call Aaron. And I'd met Aaron once or twice before, and he's been fantastic. He's pulled so much out of us.
So does he actually cast it as a director?
Well, the funny thing is, it kind of came pre-cast because Robert, the other priest, and I, we had sort of had our ideas about who we wanted. So we brought the cast together.
I see.
And then we brought in Aaron, which is not typical.
And what about costuming and music and staging?
I'm in complete priest wear, so is Bart, and he's got this beautiful green cassock that he wears, and I have the bishop's vestments as well.
And how do you look? Pretty good?
Come see the show and you tell me.
I've heard about you and your plays for a long time because of Travis Holder, who's a great friend of ours.
Who was the bishop last year.
Oh, he was the bishop?
Yes.
Oh, and you're taking his place?
Yes.
Oh, okay, that's why I know about you. And we love Travis.
He's
he used to be my editor when I was at the West Hollywood Weekly.
Makes sense.
Yep,
Okay.
here we are. Okay, we'll look for it. See you next time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Steve. And we'll be right back with Laurie Pepper. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome back to the Joan Quinn Profiles. We're here as the guest of Donnell Dadigan at the Hollywood Museum on Highland Avenue. Our guest, author, photographer, manager, Laurie Pepper, was born and raised in Los Angeles. She went to Hollywood High School, which is just down the street here, and the Westlake College of Modern Music, as well as UC Berkeley. Laurie, you've had writing, music, dance, all the arts in your background.
Yeah.
So you kind of followed those along in your career. You followed those steps. Your mother was?
She was a dancer with Martha Graham.
That was pretty cool,
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
it? Did you ever see her perform?
Yes, I did.
And then?
She was amazing. She was an amazing dancer. And once we went backstage to see Martha when my mother was much older, and Martha was at the Hollywood Bowl. And the minute Martha saw my mother, she said, "My lovely one." And it was so sweet.
Oh, so she
sweet.
remembered.
Yeah.
What about your father?
My real father, my mother and father were only married very briefly. My real father had a lot of mental health issues, but he was also a pistol. I mean, he was a Renaissance man to the very end. He was a writer.
A writer,
He was
that's what I thought.
yeah, he was an artist. He was actually an electrician in movies, and then he became a screenwriter in movies, and then he was a boxer in between.
But you kind of have all this in your background. Your
Yeah.
cousin Eve?
My cousin Eve is a very well-known Hollywood writer and did a
Eve
number
Babbitt.
of... Right,
Let's say
sorry.
the name.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know
Eve Babbitt.
Eve for years. We
Yeah.
have to say her name, Eve
Yeah,
Babbitt.
yeah.
Were you friendly or working with her?
We all grew up together. Yeah.
Oh, you did?
Eve and her sister Mirandy, and my Uncle Saul and my Aunt May had a sort of salon in Hollywood where Stravinsky came, all the poets, Kenneth Rexroth. They sort of sponsored Poetry on the Roof, which was a big thing back in those days.
Poetry on the Roof.
Yes. And I forget which roof they were on, some hotel.
Oh,
And, right. And
But
then,
that's very cool.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought maybe it was your house roof.
Right, no. Yeah, no, and they also were, they were the organizers of the Watts Towers Committee, and they saved those towers.
Oh, they
They were
did.
very involved with culture and Los Angeles, and my Aunt May was a transplant. She was from...
Was that Eve's mother?
Yeah, she was amazing. She was an artist and a wonderful person. And she came from, actually, New Orleans via Texas, so she was a real addition to the family. And she was, you know, very welcoming. Her house was always a place where, I mean, all kinds of wonderful people
But
gathered.
those were the years when all those people were still alive.
Yeah. Yes.
And a lot of them were expatriates, and
Yes,
they
yes,
loved to
yes,
get
yes,
together,
yes.
right?
And my father was hanging out with Sasha Viertel over, in Santa Monica.
Because
and
he lived in one of those houses
Yeah,
in the canyon,
yeah.
right?
And he actually told me that I met Thomas Mann and had a conversation with him when I was like 5 years old.
Yeah, I remember because they were all in Santa Monica Canyon.
Yeah.
Christopher Isherwood
Yeah,
also.
Isherwood was a big friend of my father's, and he mentions my father several times in his big fat diary.
Oh, he does?
Yeah.
And his name is?
Richard Lapon. Yeah, that wasn't really his name. He called himself Lapon, and I'm pronouncing it. He moved to Mexico when he was in his 50s after his first heart attack. So his name was really Lapin, only it really wasn't. It was really Lipinski, which is something he told me shortly before he died. He made up the Lapin name.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So we read about it in Isherwood's diaries as
He's
Lapin.
called Lapin, yeah.
Lapin.
And then when he moved to Mexico, everybody called him Lapon, which is why I'm
Oh, I
pronouncing
got
it that way.
I got it. So when you were at Berkeley, what were your career plans?
Well, okay. I started out as an English major, but my real love was folklore. But they didn't have a folklore department. So I tried cultural anthropology. But that wasn't really what I wanted. So I had what was called an individual group major at Cal in Berkeley that was folklore, but it was situated in the German department because that's where supposedly all the folklore literature was, and I had to study Old Icelandic, which is why I got married and dropped out.
Then you dropped out.
Yes.
And then when did you become a photographer at the Free Press?
Oh, that was after my husband and I broke up. I met my husband at Cal, and we broke up, and I was very, very influenced by the 60s. I mean, this was the 60s.
And who were you photographing?
Everybody, really. All the rock stars.
Here in LA.
Yeah, here in LA.
You weren't in Berkeley.
No. We lived in LA when we broke up. So that's how I came to go to the LA Free Press.
So did the Free Press give you assignments, and that's why you went out?
I had a press card. I was a press photographer. It was very cool. I was not able to resist all the temptations of the 60s, however.
So were you writing as well? Or just
No,
photographing?
I wrote poetry in those days, but I was just being a photographer.
But you then went to the Westlake Music
That was
Institute.
before. That was when I was at
early.
Hollywood High.
Oh,
yeah.
Was it close to Hollywood High?
Yeah, walking distance.
I see,
And
I see.
I thought I wanted to be a singer, and I can carry a tune, but my time is not very good. And I almost met Art Pepper, but I didn't.
But so you talked about the 60s and the influences, and that's when you ended up at Synanon.
Yes.
So tell us how that came about. How did you get to Synanon?
Well, in order to, used to be a kind of a shrinking violet. I mean, I was really, and
You were?
Yeah, I was, and I really had. I couldn't deal with putting myself out there, so I started using drugs, and it also made me much more relaxed around people, and everybody was using drugs in the 60s. I mean, I didn't know anybody who wasn't. So that's basically how I wound up in Synanon.
Well, tell us what Synanon is. Is it still going on?
No, it sort of expired of its own weight.
I wondered what happened with
Oh,
it.
it's a great story. It's in my memoir of what my version of what happened. It lasted a long time, but the whole thing about power corrupts and absolutely. So the guy who ran Synanon just became utterly corrupt, and
Oh, that's what
and
happened.
he started manipulating the people under his power. I was no longer there. But he really did some awful things.
How long did it last? It was a free clinic, right?
No,
Was
no,
it
no,
free?
no. It was a residential drug treatment program where you went in, you moved in, you lived in a dorm, you were given jobs, you did these therapeutic games, they called them, every day.
How many people were there?
1,000?
Oh, there were that many.
Oh, at
it was
least.
big.
Yeah, it was very big.
So then, with that many people there, how did you ever meet Art Pepper?
Oh, that was easy.
That was easy.
For one thing, it was, that's not that many people. And besides, when I say 1,000 people, some were in San Francisco, some were in Oakland.
I
so so Santa Monica was where I stayed for my entire tenure there. So Art came in, and he was a celebrity. Everybody was talking about him. But and people were going to look at him. I mean, that's what happened.
Why did he come in? Did he bring himself in?
Yeah, not exactly. He kind of went there because he had nowhere else to go. He was near death at that point. He was really ill.
Tells the story in Straight Life.
And in my memoir, yeah. Because,
and this is the story of Art Pepper,
yes,
Straight Life.
Yeah, and it tells it, but it tells it from the very beginning, so that you get to see all of his coming up in music in the the 40s and all of that.
And then your memoir is Why I Stuck with a
Junkie Jazz Man. Yes.
And you were talking about self-publishing that.
Yeah, actually, much to the distress of some people that I know who think I need a real publisher, I am self-publishing it because I don't want. This was published by a real publisher, but that was in the old days, and I had an editor who worshipped this book, so he wasn't going to mess with it. But now no. So I'm going to publish it myself. It's very inexpensive. I was going to do a Kickstarter campaign, but a friend gave me the money, and it's not that expensive.
Someone was on. Dolores DeLuce, who wrote her own book, and she got it started, and it's #1 on Amazon. It went to #1 on Amazon.
Right.
So, you can do it yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Plus, a friend of mine, actually, and I won't go into detail, but a national magazine, they're going to do a story about me, and it's basically because I'm self-publishing.
Because those are really interesting things for people to do. You don't have to depend on others. You don't have to depend on a publishing house, which is like kind of going by the wayside now anyway. You get an editor, you get a couple of editors, as they say, lots of eyes on what you've written and lots of editing, and you come out with something really good.
I actually had a mentor who really helped me with it. So, and then I have a friend who's a copy editor, sort of. So
you need all those kind of things.
And then the same indie thing is this stuff, which is my record label, my 8th album is going to be coming out this year. I've been in business 8 years.
Doing what? Tell us what these are.
Releasing unreleased Art Pepper recordings. There is a market for them. It's a niche market, which is perfect for online sales and things of that sort and downloads. And what happened was the royalties stopped coming in. I mean, they were cut more than in half.
He thought he left you in an okay position,
and
right?
he did. He did.
He did?
Yes.
In what respect? Because then you said the royalties left.
Yeah, the royalties from the record companies are down to very little. So then I started doing this sort of on a whim and because people wanted me to.
But you had the recording material.
Art persuaded me to, knew I was technically kind of hip. So, and I really do love electronics and all that stuff. So he persuaded me to get a really good tape deck and start recording him.
Let's go back to Synanon. You said it was kind of like a jail because there were so many rules and people had to follow.
Although I think a lot of people like Art who had spent a lot of time in jail had a sort of a comfort zone there.
Well, maybe that's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
But for me, it wasn't like a jail at all. It was like, I say it was like finding the party I'd been looking for all those years, because the people in there were amazing people.
But you had so many rules.
They weren't that bad. They really weren't
that bad.
Now,
when you look back on them, they weren't so bad, right?
No, and actually, I mean, you were permitted to do pretty much the only thing you really couldn't do was, in my day, was commit physical violence or use drugs. Or,
But you said that there were rules about having sex with each other.
Yes,
I mean,
did
you have your own rooms?
We had what they call guest rooms, where you would book yourself in for a certain amount of time, and you got more time with seniority. So you could have overnights after you've been there for a while.
Oh, you did?
You could actually sleep together. But initially it was 90 minutes, except that Art was such a favorite around there. The women just loved him, so that everybody was helping him out, and the guest room booking person gave us, for our first time in the guest room, she gave us 4 whole hours.
Oh, that was a big deal.
Yes, but in my memoir, I say we accidentally set the room on fire, so we had to use 3 of those hours basically cleaning up.
Putting the fire out. You were so hot, right?
Yeah, no, Art brought some incense.
Oh, you weren't so hot. No. But I think you looked at him at one time, you thought he was Puerto Rican. They were bringing Puerto Ricans into the program. What was that?
Well, they were bringing Puerto Ricans from Puerto Rico into the program.
But so that they could get funding?
Yes.
I got it.
Yes.
That's what I thought
and,
it was.
yeah, at that time, that was the purpose of that. And the Puerto Ricans, I mean, it was just a cultural thing, and these guys were done shooting heroin, so they were very sexually excited, and they were looking at all the women, and they'd go around going, you know, that horrible thing. Oh, my God. So I hated it, and as a result, I hated them, and I thought he was one of them, but he could no more have done that than he could have flown.
In your memoir, because you sent me several pages and I've been reading it, you mentioned Charlie Hayden.
Yeah, he had been in Synanon, but not when we were there. He had been in there earlier, and I had met him at Westlake, and Art had known him, before then.
Oh, at Westlake, at the Modern Music School?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, small world in L.A., isn't it?
Yeah, he's such a great musician, too.
Yes.
They were like on the same wave.
Yeah, Charlie was a lot younger than Art. Art was 15 years older than me, and Charlie was about my age. So his first jazz job was with Art Pepper in Hollywood.
Did you travel with him then? Were you able to travel with him?
Well, I had to, because once his career got going again, because of this and a number of other things, we toured all over the world.
And
I was the band manager, and
yes.
I did, you know, Art, basically all he really wanted to do, he didn't want to do anything else but get out on the stage and play, and then leave him alone. So I did everything else.
And so what did he play?
Saxophone, tenor, alto sax. Could you cut that? No, alto sax. He also played tenor, and he also played clarinet.
And what kind of group was with him?
A quartet. It was almost invariably a quartet.
Were any of those people well known, or did you pick them up on the road? Or
initially, we were picking them up on the road, but he recorded in New York with Elvin Jones and George Mraz and George Cables, who was his favorite pianist. And George is pretty well known in the jazz world. And Art just adored George, so he was part of Art's very last band.
And you were together till the end?
Yeah. Yeah.
And thank you, Laurie.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching the show today. Keep writing to JAQUINN1 at AOL.com. We'll see you next time on the Joan Quinn Profiles.